Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Everybody turkeyed out?
Yeah.
Yes,
We are
I'm
not serving
gobbling
turkey.
at this
The
point.
good news is we're not serving turkey for lunch today. So on behalf of the
Dinner tonight.
Spice Committee and the Spice Program Subcommittee, I want to welcome you to the 5th in our fall series of Spice programs. Just a quick reminder that this will be recorded and available online in a couple of days. And all the other programs that we've done this fall are already online. And to view them, all you have to do is go to the Spice homepage on templebethel.org, pull down the Get Involved top menu item and choose seniors, and the programming is right near the top.
Love Bob's new hair.
Spice is more than just, although, you know, it's certainly a great part of what we do.
Oh,
We lost you.
sorry, Bob.
I'm being edited already. Good.
My apologies.
What did I say? I just want to point out that one of the things that we do is work with Sterling Elementary. And one of the programs that we do is supply refurnished or refurbished laptops to deserving kids who don't have the opportunity on their own to get what is an essential part of learning and an essential part of the growing experience, and that is to be part of the digital community. And Ted Hesberg and his team are doing a great job. And if you have a Windows laptop running Windows 7 or better, and have replaced that with a newer model or are about to, please contact Ted and donate to him your older computer. And we prefer if it's in good condition, of course. And then we reload that with a special interface and communication software, and then the administration picks the students and distributes it, and we get reports back on how they're doing with it and using it. That's a great program. It's tax deductible. So please do that. The Spice newsletter that went out yesterday has information on that program and contact information for Ted. So please do that. We're also looking, if possible, to have more of you active in Spice, to join our committees. And if interested, for next year, which starts in July, to join the Spice Committee itself. And we have a program committee, communications committee that looks at our senior to senior program, our engagement committee, our Sterling Elementary committee, our potluck committee, and our SAGE committee. So please let me know, or any of the Spice committee members who you may know, if you're interested or if you want more information. Also, I'm proud to say and happy to say that we are reinstituting SAGE, which is a in-depth look over many months at a single topic, and it'll start in January and run 5 months, the 4th Wednesday of every month. And Rabbi Knight will be conducting that, and the main topic is anti-Semitism. We'll look at historically, where did it come from, where is it now, and what can we do about it? And that should be really, really fascinating. You'll get information within the next week or two on how to register, and that is something you're going to have to register for, because you'll get material sent to you every month in advance of the meeting and so forth. Our next meeting is Wednesday, the 16th at 11 on Zoom. Rabbi Dusty Class speaking on Moda Ani, excuse me. I give thanks. Strengthening our gratitude muscles and keeping them from what's happening now, which is that they're atrophying. That should be really interesting, and we look forward to it and look forward to having you join us. Today, we have a great pleasure of having Rabbi Stuart Gershon speak to us on the impact of hate. He's a Spice favorite. I believe the last thing he talked on, it started out as the 10 Commandments, but we found out was really the 14 Commandments. So it would be really interesting to hear what he has to say. So I'm going to turn this over to our program subcommittee chair, Nancy Glass, and let her do the introductions. Nancy?
All right. Rabbi Gershon retired after 25 years as the Rabbi of Temple Sinai in Summit, New Jersey. He was ordained by the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion in 1989, and he possesses 2 Master of Arts degrees, one in Jewish education from the Jewish Theological Seminary of America, and the other in Hebrew literature from the Hebrew Union College of Religion. Rabbi Gershon was a founder and tri-chair of the Darfur Genocide Rescue Committee of Summit, New Jersey from 2007 to 2009. He also served as a founder and co-chair of the New Providence Diversity Committee from 2007 to 2010. Rabbi Gershon was awarded the Keeper of the Dream Award by the Martin Luther King Day of Service Committee in 2010. Rabbi Gershon is the author of Kol Nidre, Its Origin, Development, and Significance. Please welcome back again a favorite, Rabbi Gershon.
Thank you, Nancy. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me this morning. And many thanks to, sorry about that. Many thanks to Bob Wolf, Nancy Glass, and the Spice Group for the invitation to make this presentation. So our subject is the impact of hate. And given the struggle we face in America today, one can never speak up enough about the harm and hurt that racism does to people. As Jews, we are well schooled on the impact of hate in Nazi Germany. Nazi racism transformed Germany into a genocidal state. It pushed an extreme racist agenda to annihilate an entire ethnic group in the name of a racially pure Germany. Nazi racism perpetrated mass murder on an unimaginable scale. 6 million Jews, roughly 1/3 of all the Jews in the world. Until recently, I confess, I was not at all versed on the impact of hate in Jim Crow America. As a Jew, I feel I should have known more about Jim Crow racism and its agenda to oppress an entire ethnic group in a slavery-like condition long after slavery's abolition. Jim Crow racism took thousands of innocent Black lives and inflicted horrific pain and suffering on Black Americans. It is often said that what happened to Jews in Nazi Germany, the violence, legalized discrimination, segregation, the denial of human and citizenship rights could not happen here. But lynchings and mob violence, legalized discrimination, segregation, the denial of human and citizenship rights did happen here to Black Americans. The targets were different. The strategies of persecution were the same. How did the driving force of racism lead to both the Holocaust and Black oppression in the 1930s? The first principle of Nazi racist ideology is German racial superiority. Nazi racism claimed the Aryan race to be the master race. As descendants of Aryan ancestry, Germans were the most superior race of all, and all other non-Nordic, non-Northern European races were genetically inferior. Closely connected to the doctrine of German racial superiority was the belief in the existence of the German Volk, VOLK, or peoplehood. The German Volk was more than a race community. It was a living biological organism. Those who did not belong to the German race community were a disease, a threat to the body of the Volk. A standard Nazi call to action was the slogan, "Our Volk is in danger." The first principle of American racist ideology is the existence of a unique and superior American race. Early American racism claimed the Anglo-Saxon race to be the master race. As proud bearers of Anglo-Saxon ancestry, Americans were the most superior race of all, and all other non-Nordic, non-Northern European races were genetically inferior. So we see that Nazi racism and American racism shared a similar story of national origins. And both American racist ideology and Nazi racist ideology also equated racial superiority with whiteness. Nazi racism was unapologetic in its hostility, first directed toward Blacks and those viewed as non-white. The Roma and Sinti, often called Gypsies, Poles, and Russians. It must not be overlooked that the Nazis viciously targeted homosexuals and the mentally and physically disabled. With the combination of Nazi racism and the long history of European anti-Semitism, the Jews became the most hated race of all. American racism was also unapologetic in its hostility toward non-whites, Native Americans, Chinese, Japanese, Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, Filipinos, and those then regarded as non-white, Irish, Italians, and Jews. With the emergence of Jim Crow racism in the mid-19th century, Blacks then became the most hated race of all. Now, esteemed Southern historians like Annette Gordon-Reed and C. Van Woodward see the collapse of Reconstruction as a decisive turning point in the emergence of Jim Crow. With the 1877 withdrawal of federal troops, Southern states moved quickly to build a new racist South, ruled by the restoration of white dominance. According to these historians, the overarching aim of the Southern states was to push back Black successes during Reconstruction and to reinstate upon Blacks slavery-like conditions of exclusion, powerlessness, humiliation, and the ever-present threat of elimination. Holocaust history also points to a similar kind of historical moment. With the collapse of the Weimar Republic and Hitler's rise to become German Chancellor in 1933, the Nazis moved rapidly to build a new racist Germany, dominated by the Aryan master race. And the overarching aim of the Nazi regime was to turn back Jewish successes in Germany and to reinstate upon Jews medieval-like conditions of exclusion, powerlessness, humiliation, and the ever-present threat of elimination. So a comparison of Black and Jewish experiences in 1930s Jim Crow America and Nazi Germany reveals many resemblances. Both Jews and Blacks were treated as less than human and unworthy of life. As a student of the Holocaust, I knew that Nazi racism so successfully dehumanized Jews into parasites, lice, and vermin, that most Germans in the 1930s either supported or were indifferent to Jewish persecution. As a new student of American racism, I discovered that Jim Crow racism so successfully dehumanized Blacks as subhuman, savage, and irredeemably inferior, that most Americans in the 1930s either supported or were indifferent to Black persecution. Indeed, the more one studies Jewish experience of racism in Nazi Germany and Black experience of racism in Jim Crow America, the more one sees a mirror image, a term first coined by two Southern American historians. How so? Both Blacks and Jews were the frequent targets of physical violence and intimidation. In Germany, as we all know, Jews were hounded, harassed, and beaten up in the streets. In America, Blacks were attacked and murdered by white mobs in cities all over the North, as well as the South, and the victims of lynchings as sadistic public spectacles. Both were the victims of segregation. Blacks were banned from every white public space, water fountains, schools, neighborhoods. Black children were banned from white schools. And to further humiliate, whites only and colored only signs were posted everywhere. Jews were banned from every German public space, parks, schools, stores, theaters, and museums. Jewish children were banned from German schools. To further humiliate, signs that read, "Jews and dogs not admitted," were everywhere. In America, Blacks were marked as people who did not belong by the color of their skin. In Germany, Jews were marked as people who did not belong by the yellow star on their clothing. All of these strategies were intended to make Blacks and Jews feel the same things: powerless, subordinate, humiliated, pariahs in the very lands of their birth. But another and more nefarious objective was at work. Both Jim Crow racism and Nazi racism cynically exploited fear of the supposed great power and influence that Blacks and Jews possessed to justify and legitimate their cruel and inhumane treatment. Both Blacks and Jews were demonized as a sexual menace. Jewish men were depicted as dangerous predators of German women and girls. Black men were depicted as beasts lusting after white women. Sensationalist newspapers and magazines played up Black criminality. Both Jews and Blacks were demonized as conspirators. Blacks were accused of a conspiracy to rise up, rebel, and take over America. In Germany, the Jews were accused of an international conspiracy to dominate the world. Jewish conspiracy also lay behind Germany's World War I defeat and post-war humiliation. To summarize thus far, in our exploration of racist ideologies in Nazi Germany and Jim Crow America in the 1930s, we have traced multiple parallels. Both Jim Crow America and Nazi Germany established racist regimes with similar racist ideologies, objectives, and strategies of persecution. Now, the question arises, did the Nazis see the mirror image? According to Professor James Whitman, author of Hitler's American Model, The United States and the Making of Nazi Race Law, and Natalie, thank you for putting that up there. Whoops, let me just move my text. What happened to my text? Okay. Everyone see it? Yeah? Did it disappear? Oh, wait a minute.
I can put it back. I thought it interfered with your text. I'll put it back.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Oh, by the way, I want to thank Natalie and Tracy for all their help with this. Now you see what happens is that I lose my text. Let me see. How do I get back my text? Should I X out? All right, I'm gonna X out of that. All right, actually, Natalie, if you can just take it down and then I'll get my text back. There we go. So everyone did see it. So according to James Whitman, the Nazis regarded the United States as the most highly developed racist regime in the world. They looked to America as the global leader in the creation of race-based law. Hitler and the Nazi leadership admired and praised the American race law they saw. Yes, this is very hard to swallow. So we must delve into this and understand more. What did Hitler and the Nazis see? At first blush, we might think it was segregation. And we know from the 1933 Prussian memorandum that the Nazis were very well versed in Jim Crow segregation. Nazi lawyers and high officials debated the benefits of bringing Jim Crow to America. The Nazis noticed, though, that there was more to American race law than segregation. What convinced the Nazis that the United States was a racist state to be emulated were America's race-based legal prohibitions on interracial marriage, immigration, citizenship, and voting rights. Let me put a finer point on this. The most decisive factor in the Nazis' analysis of America was not America's racist attitudes, but America's embrace of racist laws. And this wide array of race law, the Nazis noticed, targeted Native Americans, Asians, and Latinos, as well as Blacks, for ghastly, unequal treatment. Let's understand. By the 1930s, the United States was the world leader in the legal prohibition of interracial marriage. I don't know how many of us knew this. I certainly did not. Not only did 30 states have what's called anti-miscegenation statutes on their books, the United States was the only country in the world to criminalize interracial marriage. The prohibition of interracial marriage was specifically cited by Nazi lawyers as proof that America fully agreed with Germany on the evils of race mixing. What else did the Nazis see? In order to maintain America's status as a white Anglo-Saxon country, the national immigration system was rigged to favor white Northern Europeans and to disfavor non-whites, especially Asians. And those deemed non-white, Southeastern Europeans, which was another way of saying Italians and Jews. In 1924, the US Congress passed the Immigration Act, designed to exclude so-called undesirable races. The law conditioned entry into the United States on race-based tables of national origins considered inferior or inferior. In Mein Kampf, no less, Hitler specifically singled out these very race-based restrictions of American immigration law as an example of America's progress toward the creation of a healthy racist order. It's hard to believe. What more did the Nazis see? American citizenship law established a race-based order of citizenship. Some Americans were denied citizenship altogether. After the 1898 Spanish-American War, Filipinos and Puerto Ricans were only given the status of non-citizen nationals, non-citizen nationals. American citizenship law also created two classes of American citizens: those who could vote and those who could not. First-class citizenship status, with the all-important political right to vote, was restricted to white Americans, systematically relegated to second-class citizenship status, with no right to vote in the 1930s and well beyond, were Native Americans, Chinese, Japanese, Mexicans, Filipinos, and Puerto Ricans. Most shocking, though, American citizenship law did away with Black Americans' constitutionally guaranteed right to vote through a combination of covert legal devices, literacy tests, grandfather clauses, and poll taxes. Southern Blacks were legally deprived of their 14th Amendment rights to equal citizenship, equal rights, and equal legal protections. These race-based restrictions of American citizenship law were frequently cited with admiration in German legal literature. To the Nazis, American citizenship law not only demonstrated a race consciousness of which they approved. In the Nazi mind, these race-based restrictions showed that America and Germany were dealing with their respective Negro problem and Jewish problem in the very same way, but by denying both their citizenship and voting rights. Now, let us turn our attention to the Nuremberg laws and their significance. When does a state, Nancy, wait 1 second. Cancel that for a second. I want to get to, I'll show you when to show the clip. We're coming close. When does a state become racist? Many historians cite the proclamation of the Nuremberg laws on September 15th, 1935, as the precise moment when Germany became a racist state. On that day, all previous German commitments to the Enlightenment principles of human equality, equal rights, and individual freedoms were revoked. On that day, German citizenship became exclusively based on race. All rights, protections, and privileges of citizenship belong solely to the master race. Jews and all other so-called inferior races living in Germany were reduced to powerless subjects of the state with few human and civil rights. Now, the state dictated who you could and could not marry. The Nuremberg laws were proclaimed by Reich Marshal Hermann Göring, Nazi Germany's second in command, at a mass Nazi party rally. Let's watch this brief but very chilling video clip.
Reichsbürger ist nur der Staatsangehörige deutschen oder artverwandten Blutes, der durch sein Verhalten beweist, dass er gewillt und geeignet ist, in Treue dem deutschen Volk und Reich zu dienen. Eheschließungen zwischen Juden und Staatsangehörigen deutschen oder artverwandten Blutes sind verboten.
Okay. It's hard to watch. Here is the English translation of the Nuremberg laws, which is going to come up on your screen. The two laws we're going to look at were exactly what, oh, let's see. Now, how do I get to my text?
Is that no better?
Let me see. Let me see what I do if I do that. No. Yeah, it takes away my text, and I don't know how to find it.
Try
And
to
some-
minimize your Zoom window. Minimize the Zoom window.
Or minimize my Zoom window. Okay. Let's see, how do I do that?
We thought we were prepared.
No, well, you see, it's me. Oh, you know what? Wait a minute. I think I got it. Okay. Now that minimized the size, but it still loses my text. You know what? Let me see if I can go off of the printed text. Okay, so you can, is everyone still seeing the text? Yeah. Let me go back to 100% here.
Yes.
Okay, so everyone can still see the text, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so let's do it that way. Okay. Well, we're now going to take a look at what the little bit of German that you heard is exactly what we're going to look at now. And automatically, if you would go up to the first page, that's page 2. There we go. What you see before you is the English translation of the Nuremberg laws. The first Nuremberg law, known as the Law on Reich Citizenship, stripped all Jews of their German citizenship. Look at Article 2, paragraph 1. A Reich citizen is a subject of the state who is of German blood or racially related blood. The edict also deprived Jews of their voting rights. Look now at Article 2, number 3. The Reich citizen is the sole bearer of full political rights. The second Nuremberg law, and we can scroll down, known as the Law for the Protection of German Blood and German Honor, declared that marriage between Jews and Germans was now prohibited. Look at Article 1, paragraph 1. Marriages between Jews and citizens of German blood or racially related blood are forbidden. Now look at Article 2. Extramarital relations between Jews and citizens of German blood or racially related blood are forbidden. Furthermore, Article 5 proclaimed that any violation of these laws in the new Nazi state constituted a crime of race treason. Race treason, punishable with prison. I won't bother to read all of Article 5. Okay, we can take that away. So finally now, let us quickly touch on the historical connections between the Nuremberg race laws and American race law. Professor Whitman makes the argument in Hitler's American Model that the Nazi regime was both directly and indirectly influenced by American race law in the drafting of the Nuremberg laws. Tracing the influence of American race law through a meticulous examination of Nazi documents, verbatim transcripts, and legal literature, Professor Whitman concluded that the Nuremberg laws were the product of, and here I must quote him, many months of Nazi discussion and debate that included regular, studious, and often admiring engagement with the race law of the United States. For example, the verbal transcript of a 1934 high-level Nazi meeting to draft what would become the Nuremberg Laws, and we have this transcript, reveals that Nazi lawyers and officials specifically debated whether or not it was legally possible to impose criminal consequences for interracial marriage. Based on the fact that American race law had already established that precedent, the Nazis concluded it was indeed legally possible to draft such a law. Consequently, Professor Whitman concludes that the second Nuremberg Law, the law that prohibited marriage or extramarital relations between Germans and Jews and made their violation a criminal offense, was directly taken, directly borrowed from American anti-miscegenation law. Through an examination of German legal literature, Professor Whitman also found that Nazi jurists and officials were looking to establish a system of citizenship that operated on a racial order. As mentioned earlier, American citizenship law had already established such a system, using covert legal subterfuges to get around the 14th Amendment, to deny voting rights to Blacks and other minorities. Although the Nazis had no need to disguise their intentions, they still regarded American citizenship law as a useful model to draft an overtly race-based citizenship law. Consequently, Professor Whitman concludes that the first Nuremberg Law, the law that stripped all German Jews of their citizenship and voting rights, was indirectly influenced by, but not directly taken from, American citizenship law. The Nazi regime enthusiastically mined and rummaged through America's race laws for precedents and parallels, Professor Whitman writes, and he says rather mournfully, the Nazis found the inspiration they were looking for. Now, on to some concluding remarks. I would like to try to tie this all together, and then time for questions and reflections. This morning, we explored the impact of hate. From our examination of racist ideologies in both Nazi Germany and Jim Crow America, we see how lethal hate is. Hate directly leads to the cruelest persecution and to the ultimate horror of genocide. We also see the power of hate to successfully undermine our grand democratic ideals. The principles of human equality, equal rights, and equal protection under law were abandoned not only in Nazi Germany, but even in these United States of America. Professor Whitman observes, quote, America is the home of a great constitutional tradition founded in liberty, end quote. At the same time, Professor Whitman and many other American historians explain America's commitment to democratic ideals has coexisted and grappled for control with a strong racist undercurrent even before the founding of the Republic and ever since. In other words, there is nothing new about the current racial climate in our country. The murder of George Floyd reveals the depth of racism's cancerous persistence in America and the strength that reactionary racist forces possess to push back against racial equality. Our current struggle over racial justice speaks to the truth of the adage, an adage attributed, I believe, to the great orator Frederick Douglass, that history is never dead. America continues to be torn between two shaping forces. America's twin cultural legacies, grand democratic ideals on the one hand, and hateful, racist worldviews on the other, still wrestle over which America shall prevail. Thank you for your kind attention. And the floor is open for questions.
Rabbi Gershon, Michael Norman here. A question and a reaction from you. A superb talk and a wonderful summary. I'm sure that you and many others are probably aware of Isabel Wilkerson's book this year called Caste, in which, from a sociologic perspective at least, she draws the parallels that you have so nicely summarized between Nazi Germany, the Third Reich, and our Jim Crow laws and our history of slavery and racism pre-Civil War. However, in an interview that she gave with Brian Stevenson, who is the president and founder of Equal Justice Initiative, who deals with one aspect of what you so nicely talked about, which is the unequal sentencing of Blacks versus whites, she observed that during a recent visit to Germany, and specifically Berlin, she noted an important difference 75 years after this event. In Germany, there is no monumental or literary reference to Nazism or the Third Reich. There are monuments in Berlin and elsewhere, but totally unlike the Jim Crow evidence that exists in this country. Witness the flags that had been flying on state capitals, etc. Why is there this difference between the fact that we continue, certainly people in the South in particular, put up monuments and tangible evidence of support for that horrific evolution, that horrific event. And in Germany, there is only apology and after apology and no mention of Hitler or the Third Reich.
That's a great question. I can only give a partial response because it's really worth investigating, but it seems to boil down to the reality that Germany has had some of a reckoning with what happened to the Jews. And of course, the whole decision of Germany to pay reparations to Holocaust survivors comes out of the fact that Germany came to some of its own racial reckoning with what it had done to the Jews. And I call it a racial reckoning because for the Nazis, the Jews were not a religious group, they were a biological race. I think what we're finding is that America still is not, on the whole, America is not yet willing to come to racial reckoning with our history, with the history of slavery and the legacy of slavery.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rabbi Gershon?
Yes, please.
Yeah, this is Leon Ruttman.
Hi,
And
Leon.
I too will refer to the book cast since we went over it in our book club, and your remarks dovetails very well with it. And you talk about 1935 as a pivotal point where a racist state is created. I want to go into the future, the year 2042. The year 2042 connotes an inversion in America. It's a projection that the whites will become a minority, not a majority. What are your thoughts about going forward in terms of race relations?
That's also a great question. I think that, as I said in my concluding remarks, we are still struggling with these two forces in American life, and they're both still struggling for dominance, one over the other. And they're going, unless we do have that, the racial reckoning, unless we sort of do what Germany did someday, we're going to continue to have that struggle. Now, what I think you're also alluding to is that what I've described is how our American legal system can be vulnerable to racism, that racism can win over our democratic principles and rules of law. And I'm not an attorney, but that is something that we all have to be very concerned about, that our legal system has, the lawyers talk about it, but I don't know that much about it. But our system does seem to have some chinks in the armor whereby our legal protections can get abandoned, that our legal principles can succumb to political expediencies. And if racism is winning in the political arena, it can win in the legal arena. And this is something that we all have to be very watchful for and very vigilant about, to be aware of this weakness in our system and to do whatever we can to correct it and to get jurists to correct it as well. So thank you. I hope that answers your question a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. Mhm.
Yeah, it's a worry. It is a worry. Other questions?
Well, if I may again ask you a question along these lines, I'm thinking of South Africa.
Yes.
They had Truth and Reconciliation. Do you see that as a way of USA going in that direction?
I agree with that. I believe there has been a proposal for a National Commission of Truth and Reconciliation in the United States. And I would be in favor of that. Absolutely. I think it needs to be brought to that level of American consciousness, that as a country, as one country, we need to confront these twin legacies.
Mm-hmm.
That would go a long way to healing, when people can really have an open discussion and reveal what their feelings and talk about it.
Yes, and as the point I also wanted to make, which was most striking to me in really researching this, is that we have to be talking about the same thing. So many times when we talk about racism, we're talking about attitudes. But what this analysis has just shown is that we really have to talk about racist laws. And until more Americans can see this vast history of American racist law that existed, and to some extent still exists, then we're not going to get on the same page. We have to see that. We have to see that very important distinction. And
if I may, I think it's interesting because this kind of comes full circle to the first program we had this year with Rabbi Middleman, where we talk about opposing groups who are exposed to each individually to their own news and so forth. And we don't talk to each other, we talk past each other. And certainly race is an issue where that's absolutely true. And until we can have some kind of reckoning with what are the facts and what are we talking about, and have a unified discussion as opposed to two separate discussions, it's going to be tough to get to this. Something like a truth and commission and so forth may be good, but it also may just run into the same problem of those who want to believe it, and those who don't won't listen at all.
That's a very valid concern. And, that makes me want to learn more about, how did Germany finally get there, which is something I have not explored yet. But to your
well, for one thing, they lost a war.
Yeah.
And were occupied.
True. To your point about the first lecture, we do have to also deal with the fact that there is a very strong tradition in America of anti-intellectualism. There's a strong tradition in America of anti-science. And so these things are also at play in terms of these two competing forces in American life, and trying to make sure that our grand democratic traditions win out over the other.
I'd like to ask a question.
Yes.
References to Germany and Truth and Reconciliation in South Africa as well also, but in Germany in recent years, as the increase in immigration from non-white communities have populated Germany, which has created that racial tension once again, where it's potentially almost overthrew Angela Merkel's prime ministership. So it's not a dead issue in Germany at all. It may have just shifted to another type of person or type of race. So racism is not over.
Right.
And it's not over in South Africa as well.
Right, very well said, very well said. And as you say, neo-Nazism in Germany is flourishing again. It is there. It has, I remember reading a story that is infiltrated even into some of the military or the police forces. So it's not like Germany is the one and only success story of how to deal with this. More, it bespeaks the fact that there are competing forces wrestling for control of German society and American society.
In actuality, from a lot of the things that we've been hearing about, it's not just Germany, it's France, England, many of the other countries that you think this would not happen, but it is happening.
But it is happening.
Getting worse.
That's right. That's right.
Well, people are often racist, but if you don't have another race around you, you can't display it. As soon as it comes into factor, it's sort of built into the DNA and comes right out.
Yes.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
With the Biden Harris administration, how do you view their impact on the on the current legislation and sentiments?
That's a great question. I think we're going to have to wait and see. I'm thinking of the point about the whole issue now of police reform, and I think that what we have seen is that reactionary racist forces do not want there to be any reform of the police and so forth. And we're going to have to see if the Biden administration can somehow move the dial on that very issue. I think there's a tough road ahead because I just believe that those reactionary forces in America are very strong. Not that we shouldn't engage in the fight, but that we have to understand what we're dealing with.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's my sister, by the way. Hi, Brenda.
Hi, Sue.
Hello.
Hi, Kim. Good job, Sue. I'm proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Brenda.
Is Brenda moving to Charlotte?
Not yet.
Got to work on her.
Maybe
We
you guys-
need some more folks.
You can convince her.
Hi there. Nice to
I know
meet
we're up at 12:01. You guys are the bosses. Do you want to take a couple more questions or do we need to conclude? You're in charge.
If there are questions, I think we should continue.
Okay.
You would like?
I'm happy to continue. And also, if not a question, if people have reflections on what you just heard, in other words, what you feel for you is the big takeaway. I think we'd all be very interested in hearing what you feel is the takeaway.
Well,
For me-
I'd like to say that I think that the most important thing that we have to do is to confront our past. And that's, you know, a big, very big thing to do. But without confrontation and it would be very difficult, I think, to come to any kind of resolution.
My
Yes.
comment would be the increase in the amount of education in this discussion. I did not read the book that Stuart Gershon had recommended, but I did read Caste by Isabel Wilkerson. And I recommend that to anybody who is listening here, because what it does, it explains it so beautifully in terms of the segregation that's built on castes in India, Germany, and in America, and the parallels that existed and what caused them. So that once, if you're on the borderline as being racist, or even if you are racist, the idea of understanding how you got there. You know, you've got to be taught to hate. There was a song for that. You've got to be taught to hate, and you have to be taught to unhate, you know, as well.
Yes, good point. I've heard about that book. I haven't read it. I'll have to read that next. And I think what I've heard that has been ascribed to her book is this whole notion that we're now talking about, that whiteness is not as we might have thought, that it's not a fact of your skin color. Whiteness is a status that you can be granted. In other words, it's a social construct to include or exclude. And we see this. In other words, this is what the Nazis did. You know, they were really brutal with Poles, Slavs, Russians, and obviously to us, they're white, but they were deemed as non-white. We see in American immigration law that Jews and Irish and Italian, there were quotas on barring them from coming into the country. They're all obviously white, but they were barred because they were deemed non-white. This also, and so whiteness is a status that you learn that you can earn over time, which Italians, Irish, and Jews earned. Now, what is also ironic here is to this very day, far-right groups, white supremacist groups, neo-Nazi groups consider Jews to be non-white. And we are lumped in with Blacks as a non-white group to be hated. If you think of the awful neo-Nazi rally in 2017 in Charlottesville, the Jews and the Blacks, the slurs were equal, right? And then the irony is that the progressive left insists that Jews are super white. We are super privileged as whites. And that's why the progressive liberal left never perceives anti-Semitism. How can there be anti-Semitism? How can there be racial prejudice against Jews when Jews are white and super white and privileged, right? So this whole analysis of understanding whiteness as a social construct rather than a biological reality is very important to understanding all these dynamics that we're talking about.
I want to comment, going back to caste, since this is a favorite book that we discussed recently. One of the things that I learned from that book is that castes are man-made. They're manufactured by man.
Right.
So if you have the luck of being born to, if you're white, you're born into the dominant class. If you have the misfortune of being Black, you're born in the lower class. In India, the lower class are the untouchables. And they have a whole series of regulations and behaviors. So if we create a climate that engenders fear and suspicion, then our instincts for hate and for reactionary behaviors is to push the person down from coming into our class, so to speak. So they are feeling threatened. If the environment, if the leadership creates an environment which is loving and caring about people, then you will not dominate, but you will bring up and elevate people from the lower class.
Right.
And soon you can do away with caste.
Right. That's a very good point that you're making, because it is exemplified in what happened in Germany and in the United States, that this racism worked to solidify, to bring all Germans together. That there's no, in other words, there's no aristocracy of Germans. We're all German, so we're all on the same level. It brings all Germans up. And the same thing with whites. In America, there are divisions, aristocratic differences between whites. By poking, by hating the other, it makes all whites, puts all whites on the same level. And that's one nefarious way that it functions, that it gains credence, it gains followers, because then it makes everyone in that race or in that nation feel good. The other thing that I want to bring out about your point is that I think what we see today is that if you want to degrade people, if you really want to persecute people, there are two major strategies to do it. One is to make to convince everybody that those people are inferior. And the other is to make people believe that they're a threat, right? That you should be afraid of them, and therefore your racist treatment of them is after all only self-preservation, right? Of course it isn't. This is something that we all have to be very watchful for, and to push back as strongly as we can, that if we see any people being deemed inferior, if we see any people being deemed as a threat, that should be a red flag to all of us, that something foul is afoot. And this leads to the whole idea of conspiracy theories, right? You know, we're aware to some extent from our Jewish history, we're aware of Jews being the target, the victim of conspiracy theories, and how that really provoked German animosity. But we're seeing it, but it was also conspiracy theory. It was also lodged against Blacks, that they were going to rebel, they're going to rise up, they're going to take over America. So we all have to be, and of course we're seeing conspiracy theories all over the place in American discourse today. And this is a specific thing that we really have to be mindful of, that we have to push back against conspiracy theories, you know, very, very hardly. It's very important that we push back.
One of the other things that a number of years ago, I remember a lot of this discussion came about the American economic pie. So that when you said elevate another group, the group that's in the superior position fears the fact that when you elevate that other group, they will have to share that economic pie. So therefore they will have less. So it's not just an equalization situation. It's kind of like, if you give to them, I will have less. And I think that's a major factor in the discriminatory situations that exist.
Right. All of the superior race will go up, but if you allow the inferior race to come in, then that's going to bring you down economically. And that's true. I mean, I didn't get into it because of time, but you know, we could talk about the whole theme of economic suppression. That, you know, Jim Crow America tried to suppress Black success because it was taking away from white success. Nazis tried to suppress German Jewish success because it was taking money away from them.
Rabbi, I have two thoughts. First of all, if we can't convince Brenda to move to Charlotte, that's the first struggle. How will we ever cope with the other problems? The other issue, I think with the issues of climate degrading growing lands in Africa and in South America, we're looking at a longer term situation. Somebody said they wondered, now that Biden and Harrison are in, will that solve things? And maybe if they were in for 50 years, it might solve things. But I'm afraid it's going to take a lifetime and several generations to reach truth and reconciliation in this country.
Yes, yes. I think it's a great point, and I think we have to understand that we're in for the long haul. And I think any American civil rights activist would tell you that this fight is over the long haul.
We also have, if I could say something, we also have a long-term problem in this country with social stratification. And what Milt was saying before is not only an economic problem, it's a problem of, and it's especially apparent in the working classes who feel that they can't get up to what every American wants to be, which is middle class. And therefore, if the other is lower than you, you are better than them and that makes you closer to being middle class. And it's a very big problem. I remember my first job out of college was doing social work, and the boss told us right away for the Head Start program that Black people in the South, especially, the people look at them and it doesn't matter if they're lawyers or if they're garbage men, they all are Black. And that's how the white society sees them first without even knowing who they are as a human being. And I think that social stratification still permeates our society.
Yes, unfortunately so. And to your point about social stratification, I would add that, you know, when we talk about how did Nazi racism win over the German people, we you know, part of that is that they conquered with all the public works projects. They conquered unemployment. They built up German manufacturing. They raised the class of living, right? And so that everyone was doing better. And this is very important because I imagine the way I see it is the German population overlooked or was willing to accept the racial aspects of Nazism because they said, well, you know what, it's a package deal. You know, we're doing better. Everything is good. So, you know, we'll go along with the racism. We're not really in favor of it, but we'll go along with it. And so we have to be aware of this you know, people's human tendency to go along with these kinds of package deals.
Can I interject something? I had my hand up. Jews, we have found, have always had a feeling of superiority. And the Christian world looks at us that way. We claim to be the chosen people, which brings a problem to begin with, whether we feel that way or not. I think there's a sense of superiority that Jews feel.
Well, I think you're right that some Jews feel that way. Some Jews feel
yes, I will agree with that.
of an ethnic or a biological superiority. I hope that most Jews don't see it that way.
Yeah. A couple of quick comments. First of all, Nazis didn't invent anti-Semitism in Germany. It was embedded in that country at least as far back as the Teutonic Knights in the First Crusade, who decided to practice how to kill non-Christians before they got to the Holy Land by killing the Jews locally, and there were thousands of Jews slaughtered. So it isn't hard to make the next step for them. It wasn't like they started from scratch.
Absolutely right.
I'm sorry. The second is that Brenda Gale raised an interesting question about Jews and African Americans. We have been such an important part of starting the NAACP and so forth, and had always been close to them. How come they?
Oh. Bob, you froze.
Every group that came to America moved into an area, replaced an older group. The older group moved out and sold their businesses and their property to the new group that moved in. When Jews, who were the last group, moved out, as African Americans moved in, and we moved to the suburbs, the problem was redlining in both insurance and banking made it impossible for African Americans to get the loans or to accumulate the cash or get the banking or the insurance necessary to open businesses. So we unfortunately had to continue to own the housing and run the local little businesses, and it cost a great deal of antagonism, and I don't think people understand why. And the second is we ourselves have to be blamed to some degree, because we ourselves assimilated after World War II, and I think because of the Holocaust, people felt guilty, so they kind of accepted Jews at a greater rate. And we, like anybody else, felt that, oh, that's great, now we are part of the majority. And I can remember sitting in living rooms with Jews who were all very liberal members of national councils of Christians and Jews and so forth, and talking about is it good that the Schwarzes are going to move into the neighborhood with the African American maids sitting behind a very thin door, listening to all of this.
Right.
So we have to come to some grips with our own issues as well, and our own responsibilities for the attitudes we have.
Yes.
I'd like to amplify. I'd like to amplify what Bob said. Again, using a metaphor from Wilkinson's book, where she starts off talking about the permafrost melting and releasing toxins 40, 50 years later, killing cattle somewhere in Russia. And that was a metaphor for the human unconscious, that we can harbor all kinds of hatred subconsciously, and also have it, with the right circumstances, brought to the fore. And I think we need to guard against that. And that's why I felt that the more educated, the more conscious a country is, the less susceptible, and vice versa.
Yes. Good. Does anybody have a question who's not had an opportunity to ask it yet?
Yeah, I'd like to ask one. This is Alan.
Hi.
Having thought of this subject many, many times, I really sometimes wonder if racism is the correct term and not we should be using tribalism. Because even within specific, if you look at all of Africa as an example, the slave trade was in many cases instituted by other African tribes. So what would be your thought on that?
I think you raise a very good question. In my remarks, I sometimes talked about racism, but I do prefer a racist ideology. So maybe there's a role there for tribalism too. I have to think about that. But to your point, the reason why I talk about racism, but prefer racist ideology, is because sometimes I think we get into the notion that racism is just about an attitude, just an attitude. But when you talk about racial ideology, then you're really talking about laws, and then you're talking about an action plan that group wants to implement its dogmas and its doctrines against other people. And so for me, it's much more helpful to talk about racist ideology than just racism. And I'll have to think about what you just said, that tribalism may have a resonance that could be very valuable as well.
Well, what I was getting at is if you think about the caste system that exists in India, a nation over 1.5 billion people, who essentially are of the same race, and yet they have the most racist, that's been an extreme racist ideology dating back millennia.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in other words, you're talking about these ethnic tribal loyalties kind of thing. Yes, I think that's also something that should be in the conversation. Because I think ultimately what we're talking about is
in the book,
it is so hard
of religious.
Yeah, go ahead. Were you raising a question? We heard you. Come on. Oh, okay. So just to finish out the point, what makes it so hard to change racist attitudes is that being human, we sometimes go, emotions take more priority than reason. And that's a problem, that emotions win people over. And so tribal loyalties can win over what we logically, reasonably know not to be the case. You're muted. Ah.
I think she was clapping.
Oh.
Deservedly so.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. This was just fabulous and fascinating. Because it was so fascinating, we've run out of time, so we will not do breakout groups today. I'll just ask Nancy Glass and Harry Cronson stay on if you would. We have a little bit of business to take care of when we're done here, along with Tracy. Thank you, Rabbi. That's just fascinating, and I think it's interesting that we've sort of had from Rabbi Middleman to Tom Hanchett talking about segregation and effect in Charlotte, to you, and moving forward with Sage on this topic in depth, and maybe you'll be a part of that, I hope. I think that's going to be fabulous. So as soon as we get the information up and out, I suggest you all register for that, because it's going to be a continuum of sort of the arc of where we've been headed with this, and we'll cover a lot of these same topics in depth. So thank you. I too want to thank Natalie and Tracy.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah,
I really appreciate
without them, we don't have spice. It's pretty simple.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if Natalie got off, but Tracy, if you could tell her what we said, or she should look at the recording at the end.
Yes, I appreciate you both very much. And thank you to Spice, and if I just may say thank you to everybody for your kind attention, and thank you for your just terrific questions.